Kal Kadosh Boker Or Masechet Nazir Daf Bet Amud Aleph. We're starting a new Masechet, a new Masechta, as the Ashkenazim say, which is after Nedarim, Nazir. So we already explained in the Akdama in the Masechet that a person that accepts upon himself a neder of Nezirut, so he has certain halachot which the Torah actually come and they say. So it says now like this: Kol kinuye Nezirut ke Nezirut. Any type of a lashon which is like a nazir or an acceptance of a nazirut is like a nazirut, right? Like he says, Hareni nazir. Hareni nazir is mamash a nazir. But there's other kinuyim. The other kinuyim were like other types of connotations or types of things that you're going to utterances, which is like going to be a nazirut. Haomer. Somebody says, ehe, I will be, without saying the words, right, that he wants to be a nazir. Harez a nazir. He becomes a nazir. Yeah? The Gemara is going to explain, I'm going to be what? Right? I could be a hamor, or I could be anything. Well, all of a sudden now I become a nazir. Okay, we're going to see. Yeah, very good. Chazak Baruch. Yeah, Mr. Katzin, we're going to see that in the Gemara. Or somebody passes by that's a nazir and he says, I'm going to be the same. I'm going to be. So, okay. Or, which means that the kavanah is that he's going to have long hair like a nazir. He's a nazir. Why? Because when he comes, he says, I'm going to be so handsome like that, which means, they have a nice long hair, right? It's very handsome. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. So, same thing, becomes a nazir. Then the Gemara is going to bring down the first concept of kinuye nezirut like nezirut, because these two were the yadot of nezirut. They're not kinuyim, they are the yad. You remember the yad was like an extension to the nezirut. Ehe or ehe nae. Now we're going back to the kinuye nezirut is like kinuyim, like the nezirut in itself. For example, he comes and he says, "Ahe nazik, I'm going to be a nazik, or a naziach, or paziach." Harez a nazir. It's a nazir, right? Again, I don't know exactly literally if you want to ask me what are these three words, but nazik, naniach, naziach, and paziach. Yeah? Next, aomer kazeh. I'm going to be like this. Or at any misalsel. I'm going, misalsel besarot. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how you say it literally in English. You're playing curling if you want. Yeah, if you want, you're curling the hair. Yeah, Hareni mechalkel, right? Hareni hare alai l'shaleach pera, or that I'm going to come and pay the pera, which is leaving the hair long and is a nazir. Hare alai tzipurim. What happens if he comes and says, I'm going to bring birds? Rabbi Min says he's a nazir, and Hachamim say that he's not going to be a nazir. We're going to explain in the Gemara what exactly are we referring to. Says the Gemara, Michdi, Tana beseder Nashim Kai. 1 second. We're in the middle of Nashim, correct? We just finished before Gitin. We had Ketubot, right? Yevamot. 1 second. We're in the middle of Seder Nashim. My Tamatana Nazir. Why in the world is Nazir, right, part of the Seder Nashim? At the end of the day, it shouldn't be in Seder Nashim. Right? So he comes and he says, maybe it should be in Kodshim because you have different korbanot or different things. But why in the world is it going to be in Seder Nashim? So says the Gemara, Tana Krakai. It's a pasuk. The reason why is because it's a pasuk. The pasuk says, Kikach ishisha uvala. When a person is going to take a woman, he's going to have relations with her. Vayan, it's going to be not imtzachem be'enav, because she's not going to find favor in his eyes. Kimatza ba'ervat davar, because he found her on Ervat Davar. Vekatav la sefer keritut, and he wrote a sefer keritut, right? Which means that he wrote a book which is a get, a book which is cutting off, a sefer keritut. Venatam biyadah, and he gave it to her hands. Remember, the get has to be given to her hands. Veshilecha mi beton, he's going to send her from his house. So you see from here, a person comes and b'derech klal, he's going to be megaresh ishto because of davar erva. Meaning, what's the reason why a person gets divorced? The majority of the times, that's what he's saying here. The majority of the times is because dvar erva, meaning there was something immoral. And that's why he divorces his wife. Right? Ve'hachi kaman. Now says the Gemara, this is what it means to say. Right? Hachi kaman. Right? He comes and he says, Mi garam la avera. Yeah, he comes and he says, who caused this avera of lotinah? Yain. Right? Who was the one that caused, right, this avera? Yain. Wine. Remember, last night we spoke about in Smichat Chaver, the power, We spoke about the power of wine, not serving wine, right? What does that mean?
To women,
wine,
to men,
right, causes kalut rosh, and it brings a person to do an avera. 1 second, yeah? What does that mean? It means that a person comes and that second, wine is what causes the person to do an avera. Okay? Correct or not?
לא.
There's the Gemara. Who was the one that caused the avera of lotina? Yain, wine. The Kamar, we already said what causes the isur of wine, right? We said wine causes lotina. That means if you come and you go out to a drink, right? Usually it's not only just for a drink, right? So that's the problem. You have to be very, very careful about that, right? The second that it starts with a drink, it leads further. Yeah, exactly. Okay? The Kamar, we already said, anybody that sees a sota b'kilkula, yazid atzmo min hayayin. Right? So because of that, the Tana was misader, right? Masechet Nazir, in order to teach you that Nazirut stops niyuf. Nazirut stops infidelity. It stops adultery. And that's the main cause of Gitin. So it's all part of Nashim. It's all part of Seder Nashim. The entire concept of Girushin is usually because of adultery. What causes adultery? The wine. And therefore you have also Sotah, which is obviously going to be Nashim, and also the Nazir. So now we make sense why Nazir is part of Nashim.
The Nazirut of the man
is
going to...
There's the Gemara. Patach bekinuyin u'mefaresh yadot. I don't understand the Mishnah. Are you guys listening? Listen carefully. It starts the Mishnah. Kol kinuye nezirut kenezirut. All the kinuyim of nezirut are considered nezirut. And then what does it continue? With yadot. What's going on here? You're not with me.
I'm with you.
One more time. The Mishnah starts. Kol kinuye nezirut is like nezirut. And then it says, Haomer eha or he, and Haomer ehe naeh. What is that? Yadot of Nazirut. It's not Kinuim. So why does the Mishnah start with Kinuim? A second later go to Yadot, and then 2 seconds later, now we're going to Kinuim. Nazik, Naziyah, Maziyah, Hareni Chazeh, Hareni Misalzeh. Those are the Kinuim. What's going on? You'd start with Kinuim, 2 seconds later you go with Yadot, 2 seconds later you go with Kinuim. What's going on? Amar Rava b'itema, right? So comes Rava, and some people say Kadiv, which means nobody, right? Chasure Mechsera, which means that we don't know who's the one that's actually saying this Braita. Chasure Mechsera v'achiktani. Remember the Mishnayot, I explained this many, many times. The Tiferet Yisrael explains that since Mishnayot were always sung, just like we sing Bameh Malikin. Bameh Malikin is not read, right? Bameh Malikin is sung. Pirkei Avot is sung. Why is it sung? Why do you sing it? Because that's the way to remember. So therefore, in order to come and to remember, they would sing. Now, not always did it fit into the tune. So when certain things didn't fit into the tune, they worded it poetically that it wasn't there. So therefore, the Mishnah, sometimes when the Mishnah says, when the Gemara says on the Mishnah, Chasure Mechsera ve'achi ketane, it means that the Mishnah was lacking, but really, Be'emet, you had to add this part of the Mishnah. But why was it lacking? It didn't fit into the song. Okay, that's the Tiferet Yisrael. Yes. You see from there. No, as biglal zeh, tamid haya oto lachan. As biglal zeh, it was something yuchad. So it says here like this: Kol keniyeh nezirut kenezirut, vidot nezirut kenezirut. You had to add in about the yadot, which is also like nezirut. And then it says these are the yadot, which are the first two cases. Haomer ehe areh nazir. So ask the Gemara, velifrosh kinuya bereisha. So explain first the kinui. You started off with kinui, then you said yadot, then you explained yadot, and then you're going to explain kinui. Start with the kinui first. Answers the Gemara, Tana me'ahud salik, ha'u mefaresh bereisha. The last one that you just mentioned, you're going to explain. So if I'm going to tell you, listen, A, B, C, D, sometimes I'll explain to you the D before going back to the A. And the reason why is because since the last thing that I just mentioned to you was the D, so I'll explain the last thing, and then I'll go back to the A. So therefore, the same thing. I started off with Kinuim. Then I said Yadot. If I already just mentioned Yadot, I'm going to mention Yadot, explain what Yadot are, and then after explaining what Yadot are, I'm going to go back to the Kinuim. And we have a proof to this yisod. Where do we see this? Kidetzram, we learned in the Mishnah and Shabbat of Kaf Amubet. Bameh malikin. Right? What does that mean, Bameh malikin? With what do you light the candles with? The ptilot u'shminim, Bameh malikin. Mefaresh, and we explain, Em malikin. You do the Mishnah. Bameh malikin u'Bameh malikin. En malikin. En malikin. Say malikin. You just started with malikin. Bameh malikin. So, right, 1 second, right? So he comes and he says, so therefore, you're going to come and you're going to do that. So he says the same thing. Next, also in Mishnah in Shabbat, Bameh tomenin, yeah, Bameh tomenin, u'Bameh tomenin. Yeah? So what does that mean? You come and you say, what are you going to do hatmana with? And what are you not going to do hatmana with? Uvemifaresh, we explain there in the Mishnah, and tomenin, lo begefel, lo bezefel, bereisha, in the beginning. Also over there, Bameh isha yotzea, Bameh ene yotzea. What can a woman go out with on Shabbat and it's not considered carrying? And what can she not go out with? And we explain, lo tetzei isha bereisha. She's not allowed to go out with certain things. So you see from here, the 3 different proofs, all from Masechet Shabbat. Mamash, like, starting with the Prakim and everything, all from Masechet Shabbat, 3 different proofs that even though we started with one, with A, and we finished with B, we're going to explain the B before going and explaining the A. Okay? Clear until here. Right?
And she always says in the Chumash.
Asa Gemara. 1 second. Vatnan. We learned in a Mishnah the exact opposite. Why? You're bringing me proofs from Shabbat. I also have from Shabbat differently. What do I have in Shabbat? We learned in Shabbat, how does the animal go out? And how does the animal not go out? And then we explain, the gamal goes out like this. The camel goes out like this in the Reisha. So you see there, we had A, B, and you started with A, not with B. So what are you doing? Another one, another Mishnah, this is in Bab Batra. Yesh nochalin u'manchilin, yesh nochalin v'lo manchilin. U'manchilin v'lo nochalin, lo nochalin v'lo manchilin. U'mefaresh, elu nochalin, manchilin bereisha. Which means some people, they could inherit and give over inheritance. Some people, they can inherit, but they can't all give over inheritance. Other people, they can give over inheritance, but they can't inherit. And other people, they can't do either or. Right? And there's many different explanations on each one. And there we explain the first one in the beginning. So what's going on? So answers the Gemara, Ela leolam, you're right. Taniachi v'taniachi. It's sometimes this and sometimes that. Meaning once in a while. Meaning the Gemara is saying, once in a while we'll start with the first part, and once in a while we'll start with the last part. Elahatam, in the 3 Mishnayot that we mentioned at the beginning, the Surah de Nafshehu, we're talking about an Isur on the Gabra, on the human being. Mefaresh Isur de Nafshe Bereisha. So we explain the Isur at the beginning. Kabe Behema, what to do with an animal. The Isur Aidi Behema, right? So there, by the animal, the Isur Aidi Behema Udati, which the Isur is only on the Behema and not on the human being himself. Mefaresh Heter Bereisha. So we explain the Heter beginning. Okay, meaning like this. When it's on you, I have to explain to you first what's a sur. This, by the way, is musar today, right? When we're talking about the human being, first I have to explain to you what's a sur. When I'm talking about your animals, right, then I come and I tell you first about the heter way. Then I'm going to tell you the isur way. But it's to do with you yourself, right? Me, myself, and I, meaning the human being himself, I first have to know what's a sur. To do with the animals, it's not on me, it's on the animals. So there I want to first know how to do a beheter. And then I'm going to tell you what's isur. Okay, it's a big musar. So mefaresh heter bereisha. Okay, bet amul bet. Right? 2b. Okay? Gabe yesh nochalim. To do with yesh nochalim. Nami, the same thing. To do with the nachalot. They were talking about inheritances. Mefaresh ikar nachala bereisha. We explained the ikar of nachala bereisha. What's the ikar nachala bereisha? A son that inherits the father. That's the ikar nachala. Right? Elahacha, but over here, lefaresh kinui bereisha. Why don't you explain the kinui at the beginning? Meaning we had right now 5 different cases. 3, right? 3 where we started with the last thing first. 2, and all 3 were in Shabbat, right? Bameh mamlikin, bameh tomenin, and bameh isha yotza. We had 2 in the other side around. We started with the last thing first, right? What was the with the first thing first. What was the first one? Bameh behema yotza, and yesh nochalim. 2 mishnayot the other way around. So the Gemara answered, you're right, sometimes. Then the Gemara asks, fine, but start with the kinuim. So the Gemara gave a svara. What's a svara? The first 3 of Shabbat was an isur on the gavra, an isur on you. It's not an isur on the chefza, on the animal, on your property. It's an isur on you. When you have an isur on you, you start with the isur first. When you have an isur on the animal, you start with the animal first. What do you do with the nachalim? We mentioned the ikar nachalot. What is the ikar of nachalot, of Yerusha? It's obviously going to be what? The son. So therefore, that's why we started that one first. So ask the Gemara, what about our Mishnah? Because our Mishnah is either going to be like the tiebreaker, right? Or it's going to be the other way around. And that's going to become 4 against 2, not 3 against 2. Our Mishnah, what's going on? He says yadot comes from a drasha. And a drasha, which is not mefurash, is very, very chaviv to us. Why? It's like a chidush. And therefore, since it's a novelty, it's something new, so therefore we come and we prefer to mention the yadot first, even though really be'emet, I should have started the other way around. Right? Yeah, because it's chaviv to you. When you come, right? When you come and you do it, it's chaviv. So it's so chaviv. I'm going to mention the chidush. You're going to learn something, a new sugya. But you're going to come, you're going to say, by the way, I saw chidush. Really be'emet, maybe the Gemara, but it's a chidush, something new. When it's something new, it's chaviv to you. It's something very, very precious to you. So you're going to mention it first. So says the Gemara, okay, fine. So if it's so chaviv to you, the yadot, because it's a chidush, so mention at the beginning. Why did you start with the kinuim first, then yadot, then you're going to explain the yadot because of the chidush? Start with yadot from the beginning. So says the Gemara, Tanaki matchil biikar akorban. Ulinyam perushe nefarish yadot bereisha. No. When I'm going to start off something, I have to explain something which is the most pashut, which is to do with the korbanot. What is the most pashut, which is talking about the yikar? The yikar to do with the korban and everything is what? Is only the kinuim. The kinuim obligate a korban. A yadot does not obligate a korban. Okay? But the fact that I'm going to come and I'm going to obligate, yeah? So he comes and he says, right, a korban. So he comes and he says, because of that, I mentioned that first. But then when I'm explaining, I'm going to explain the chidush first. Because I like this. Meaning, I have to first tell you the ikar. The ikar is what's the mainstream. What's the mainstream? What we just mentioned now, right? Which is the kinuim. But then I'm going to tell you the chidush, right? I'm going to explain the chidush first. Okay? Nekuda. 2 dots. Bet amubet 2 dots. Says the Gemara, how many is a nazir? Person comes and he says, he's going to become a nazir. Dilma betanit kama. Maybe just means I'm going to be in a tanit. Just means I'm going to be. I'm going to be what? I told you before, somebody wants to be a chamor. Yeah? So he wants to be a tanit. Whoever told you that he wants to become now a nazir? So Amar Shmuel says, Kigon shaya nazir over lefanav. Like Harav Katzin Amar, what are we talking about? That there was a nazir passing by. So when the nazir was passing by, he comes and he says, I'm going to be like what? You just saw the nazir. So I figure you're going to be like in the nazir. So Lema Kasav Shmuel, why don't we just say that Shmuel holds Yadayim shen mochichot lo avyan yadayim, that if it's not going to be mochiach, it's not considered yadayim. Remember this machloka we already learned before, which means that if it's not going to be 100% barur, it's nothing there. So for the same thing over here, it's not 100% barur. Why? Because if it's not muchach, meaning if a person just says what? So I'm not going to say that that's what the pshat is. So now that you see it passing by, and now it's muchiach, so now it makes sense. Okay? So Amri, we said, when there's a nazir which is passing by in front of you, nobody has a doubt, because that for sure, right, is going to be a nazir. But if a person just says and there's no nazir going by in front of him, maybe bemet it's going to be a tanit, and therefore we have a safek. We don't know. Maybe it's a tanit. Maybe it's going to be a nazir. We don't know. So therefore, he holds a yadayim and a mochiot is a yadayim. But nevertheless, you always know that if there's a nazir passing by in front of him, that's meaning I cannot bring a proof to Shmuel whether yadayim mochiot or not. Here we're talking about that the nazir was passing by in front. So the nazir is passing by in front. According to everybody, it's a muchach, and therefore for sure it's going to be a nazir. So says the Gemara, maybe the kavanah was when I say which means I'm going to be right like this nazir, and I'm going to be patur from bringing the korbanot. Which means, אני מקבל על עצמי להביא את הקורבנות, that חייב נזיר בהם, במקומו, instead of him. Not that he's going to become a nazir. Meaning, right now, he comes and he sees a nazir going by. He says, What is We understood means, I want to be as a nazir. No. Means, I'm going to bring his korbanot, the nazirut. Meaning he's not going to bring this korbanot. I'm going to bring his korbanot to Nazir. But for me to become a Nazir, you crazy?
Can you bring the korbanot of Nazirut if you're not a Nazir?
No, but I'm bringing it on his back. Bimkomo.
He
He cannot do it if it doesn't exist. But
he's going to use you as a shaliach.
No,
Bring
you
it-
cannot
bring
go
it
and give it.
Yeah?
Cannot go
So
and
says
give
the
it.
Gemara.
You can eat them also.
Yeah, sure.
Shaliach.
I'm bringing on your back.
Yeah.
Right? If you right now come and you make a donation to the synagogue of $1 million, yeah? John Jack can pay.
Amen.
הלוואי.
לא,
Yeah, what? For sure you could do that.
אמרתי הלוואי.
לא.
Oh, say
He said
Hashem.
if. He said if.
Bezrat Hashem, say.
בעזרת השם.
Bezrat Hashem.
אני
If
said
you
that
want,
also
you'll
you
be able
will
to.
pay.
תגיד
אמן.
Yeah?
אמן.
If you want, if you sign a contract, you'll be able to. You'll see. Yeah? לא אם ירצה השם, ודאי
הוא
רוצה
רוצה.
השם. ודאי רוצה. That's a ספק. For sure. Yeah? We'll bring you the contract now. Yeah? Right here, we'll sign you. We have all the witnesses here. All the witnesses. Yeah? So answers the Gemara. Answers the Gemara. Yeah? But I said him up. Yeah? He says the Ka'amar belibo. What does that mean? He comes and he said afterwards, he was mitkavem belibo during the time of the neder that he's going to become a Nazir. Meaning, he just said aheh. What's in his mind? You remember we spoke about this, to do with tzedakah and with other things. If you come and you say, right, you're going to give tzedakah to the Bet Knesset. Now, David thought in his mind that he's going to give $1 million, right? But he didn't say it, but he just thought in his mind. But he said, I'm giving tzedakah. And then he thought in his mind $1 million. He's only going to give $1 million. Right? Why? Because it was in it. So same thing. Here, the fact that he thought of it in his mind, that's what all the... So says the Gemara, so obviously, what's the case then? So Maudatim, I would have thought to say that he needs his mouth and his mind, his heart to be equal. Right? That means it has to be at the same time in the neder when it says aheh. Kamashmanan comes to teach you that when you say eheh and the Nazir is passing by in front of you, it's like you're saying eheh Nazir, and therefore it's like pi v'libo shavin that you become a Nazir. 2 dots. Eheh Nazir, eheh naeh. I'm going to become naeh, which is again a yadot. Right? He says he's going to become a Nazir. Says the Gemara, lepanav b'mitzvot. Maybe it means that I'm going to beautify myself in front of Hashem with b'tzura naeh meuderet with mitzvot. Because the Tanya is we learned in the Bright. What does it mean? I have to make myself beautiful in front of mitzvot. You have to make a beautiful sukkah, lulav naeh, a nice lulav, tzitzit naeh, a nice tzitzit, Sefer Torah, and also beautiful. Some people think that it only has to be, right, kosher. The Sefer Torah has to be naeh. What does it mean, naeh? Beautiful ktav. When you open up, you say, beautiful.
It's about the
right?
ktav. It's not about the...
Also meudah, that's for sure. But also about the beauty in the way that itself, and it's the way that it is itself.
Not
You
like
could have, right, you could have something 100% kosher, but it's not beautiful letters. You open it up and you don't like the letters. No, it has to be naeh, right? The same thing with tzitzit. Right? You could have a tzitzit. It looks, no. Beautiful tzitzit. Everything should look nice. Right? So he comes and he says, I'm going to come and I'm going to put it around with a shirayim. No. It has to be beautiful mitzvot. So Shmuel says, Shetafus Pisaro, he's playing with his hair. If he's playing with his hair and then he comes and he says, so then obviously he's talking about Nazir. Right? Okay? So says the Gemara, Nazira minta davira. Right? He comes and he says, 1 second, Nezirut is a Devar Avera, which means it's not proper for a person to accept upon himself Nezirut. So you call that Naeh because it's an Avera? How do you say it's an Avera and it's an, it's Naeh? So says the Gemara on Gimel Amudala from the top, yes, you could say that it's Naeh. Why? Because even according to Rabbi Lazar Kapar that he says the Nazir is considered a Choteh, that's only to do with a Nazir Tameh. Right? The idea to buy mitzvah because since right now he has to take off his hair, his nizirut that already passed by, so therefore the pasuk says that all the days that he counted until now, which was tameh, right? Because he became tameh. Hatamhu there, right? Does Rabbi Lazar Kapara say that he's a choteh? Because he's being over on nizirut. Nazir tahor, but a nazir tahor, lav choteh karebe. You're not calling him a choteh. So the fact that you're not calling a Nazir tahor a choteh, so therefore it's actually going to be good. It's actually he's doing a mitzvah because he's going to segregate himself in order that he's not going to do an averah. And therefore, when he's holding with his hair and he says the hena'eh, that be'emet is talking about the beauty of the mitzvah of becoming a Nazir.
Why does